Hello, listening people.
Hello.
You're listening to Spin Post Presents Pictures Powwow. I am one of your hosts, Ryan Swinsky.
And I'm the other host, Bartek.
Bartek, how are you?
I am good. How are you, Ryan?
I'm doing very well. We're back at it again, hosting our show Pictures Powwow, the show in which we talk about a movie, and I'm excited to talk about movies again. It's been a week or so since we've talked about movies, and just good to get back in the saddle. Bartek, Pictures Powwow, the show that we're doing, what do we do on this show, just for those who aren't initiated into the club, into the powwow?
Pictures Powwow is where we have a little powwow about pictures. But not like still image pictures, but moving pictures. Cinema, movies, as we call them. We have a 3-week cycle in which one of us, myself, then you, then the listening people, that's you guys listening now, recommend a film, and that is the film that we talk about for the episode. This week it is a me episode, so we're talking about a film that I picked.
And you did pick a film. What was that film?
I did, and I was proud of myself. The film that I picked is a Japanese animated film called Wolf Children, and when I look it up online, some places call it Wolf Children Ame and Yuki, so either one works, I guess.
That was the title screen that came up on the copy I watched, but I looked for Wolf Children, so it's still the same movie.
Yeah.
So we are watching Bartek's choice, Wolf Children, from 2012, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe so, yeah.
Last episode I asked you what year, and you tentatively said, I don't know, early 2000s, and then it was 2012, and then it was like early 2010s.
We're very lucky that someone in the call had Google open.
And so for the listening people, we are going to be talking about this film in depth. So if you have not seen this film, we will be talking about this in depth with spoilers. So give this film a watch. We are going to also be talking about the sub version of this, the subtitled version of this with the original Japanese language, in case people are curious as well, because we have to make that obvious for people. So we are going to be talking about the 2012 film Wolf Children. Bartek, you recommended this film, so I'm imagining you have a history with it.
Yeah, a brief one. So I had not heard of this film until this one person that I'm Facebook friends with, he lives in America, brought up how much he enjoyed it after watching it. And it was one that I, based on his recommendation, was willing to check out at some point, but I think I delayed on actually watching the film for like a year or two. So I remember it was in December 2018 when I watched this, and I watched it not too long after I watched another animated film from Japan called A Silent Voice, which is that one about the boy who used to bully a deaf girl. So I was kind of in the mood in that month to, check out anime films, I guess. And those were the two that I saw. And I remember I enjoyed A Silent Voice a bit more. So when I think back on those two, I'm like, oh yeah, both were good, but A Silent Voice was really good. But I decided to go with Wolf Children for this episode because I remember I wanted to give it another chance. Not that I didn't like it, but I wanted to see it again, just without the I guess the influence of the other film I saw. And also, I thought that you and Rachel might enjoy it, so I wanted to see how you found it.
So yeah, I don't have a history with this film. I do know about the other film that you mentioned that you watched, A Silent Voice, but I haven't seen that one either. So it's also that thing of like you chose a film that I haven't heard of as well. I haven't heard of this film. I hadn't seen it before. I haven't seen anything from it before. Like even with some animes or animated films from foreign lands that I haven't heard of before, there's at least an image or character design or an idea that I'm like, I think I'm familiar with this in some way, shape, or form. Like, I haven't seen A Silent Voice, but I know about the premise, and I know if I saw the character design of, like, one of the lead characters, I'd be like, oh, yeah, that's that movie about the deaf girl or whatever. But
yeah,
this, and I looked up the filmmaker of this, and I am familiar with one or two of his other works whose names escape me, but I'm familiar with, like, the character designs, and I'm like, oh, yeah, I know of this, but this one didn't know a thing, didn't know any image from it or anything other than you said at the end of the last episode we're doing this, and our guest for last episode said this guy worked on the Digimon movie, so I was like, oh great, we're gonna get a Digimon movie level film.
Yeah, when I checked him out last night just to see what else he'd done, and I've only seen one other film he made, The Girl Who Leapt Through Time.
Ah, right, yeah. But so I walked into this being like, okay, well, Bartek recommended it, so I'm imagining it'll be interesting. And also, this is a newer animated Japanese movie, so the level of quality I expect to be a little bit higher than if you recommended one from like the 90s or something. Not to bash older anime films, but I don't know. I'm more familiar with some of the more newer ones being a bit more of my taste, my lane kind of thing. Although
Yeah, good point. Yeah, that's a
Akira
good
is
point.
still good, and all those things are still good. But yeah, I hadn't seen it and I didn't know anything about it. I will say I was turned off when I saw the poster because I'd looked this film up like Wolf Children. And the poster, I was like, "Yeesh, I don't like the look of this." I even
You mentioned to me on Facebook, like, is this film as fur-baity as the poster?
And the answer's no.
Yeah.
I mean,
I
it's
mean,
still
no, yeah.
a film for furries, but
Oh, they'll definitely get a specific something out of it, yeah.
but it's not as fur bait as I expected. So just to get into the pitch of this movie, Bartek, how would you best describe the plot of this movie? What would be your pitch of it to people?
Well, the opening narration says that it's a story about the narrator's mother and her I guess lover.
Yes,
But it's more so about a single mother raising her two children who are half human, half wolf.
they are werewolves,
Yeah.
as the film describes. And yes, that's the film. It's just the struggle of this mother raising these wolf children. She has to move out of the city and move to the country in Japan, and self-sustain. Fix up the house, make a farm, make friends, decide whether or not the children should, go to school or live as wild animals. And the children are also discovering that about themselves. And it's a film that really explores connection and one's own identity and all these kind of interesting things that we've seen tackled before many a times in movies. But of course, this is an interesting approach in which you have, like, my children are monster creatures.
Yeah, it's like a nature versus nurture kind of story, but you can say that it's an allegory, like, oh, raising two children is like raising two wolves, but it's played straight, as in, no, they actually have wolf-like tendencies, and there's some problems with that.
Yes. So, Bartek, how did you feel about watching it again?
I'm actually really surprised at how much I loved it the second time around.
Yeah? What about it really struck home for you this second viewing?
I think because I knew how it ended, I had that in the back of my mind as I watched the whole thing, and I was just noticing, little things that are a lot more poignant, knowing like, because later this ties into this, and yeah, just a lot of little things I was noticing as I was watching it.
Yeah, I enjoyed it very much, surprisingly so. I will say the beginning of it was a little rough for me. I didn't enjoy the beginning as much. A few things just turned me off. Once they got to the country, the film picked up for me. And I think this may be just a first viewing thing. I reckon on a second viewing, I reckon that first chunk will be easier to swallow down. But for me, the first little bit of it, I wasn't as engaged. But once I got to the countryside, and actually it felt like, okay, now we're getting to the big juicy story here. This thematic stuff and all this
Yeah,
kind of thing is where it really picked up for me. Once I left the city, it really picked up.
yeah, I forgot how long we spent with the mother and the father. Like, in my memory, I remember it being a lot more brief, but there's a good, like, 20-25 minutes there, isn't there?
Yeah, and I don't even oppose to that. It's just some elements of it I was like, like, okay, I'll be honest. His wolf design was fucking ugly. I don't give a shit what the furries think or anime fans. his wolf design was atrocious to look at. And what I mean by that too is there was a point in his transformation when I was like, oh, that's actually really cool. And then he kept transforming and he kept looking uglier and uglier. And I was just like, I don't like this at all. I did not
Yeah,
like
scale
his
it back.
design. Yeah, it felt like they had it when he first started transforming and his fluffy hood on his jacket started to match like he's made his tougher fur around his neck, but then it just kept going and he turned blue, and it was like okay, and he had like a really snivelly snouty face, and I did not like that at all. And I was like, oh, Bartek, and then it was like. They have sex. We don't see it properly, but I was just like, "Oh, Bartek's got me into some furry shit. I don't
I
want
will.
this."
I will say, so after you mentioned the thing about like, oh, the poster looks fur baity, part of me was kind of like, oh, you'll eat your words when you watch the film. But then when it got to that scene where they were silhouetted and he was still a wolf and they were lying down, I'm like, oh god, that's not helping my case.
No, but the film doesn't really, in its defense, doesn't really fully cross the line for me of being as furbaity as it could have been. I was expecting a lot more and a lot worse in terms of that, but for me, I wonder what the furries think. God, that's a statement I've never thought of in my life. I wonder what the furries think, or Japanese animated fans of his character design once he's a full-on wolf man, because I don't know, I just didn't like it. And that turned me off at the beginning. I was like, ugh, I don't like this. I don't want to see more of this. Thankfully, the other characters that shift into animals and the actual other real animal designs, I thought looked way better than
Yeah,
his one, and it was a real turn off at the beginning. I'm walking in thinking, okay, this kind of looks a bit fur baity, and then that happens, and it's great. And not only is it like uncomfortable for me who's not into furry stuff, but it's also just like it was. I just didn't like the design. I was like, ugh, I don't want to see this for a whole movie. And then thankfully we don't.
yeah. Just to let everyone know, this isn't a film that is like made specifically for furries in mind. It's just like, oh, you think to yourself, oh, furries will get something a little bit different out of this than what the film's really going for. Like, even when he's lying down and there's that silhouetted shot where he's still a wolf, it is played tenderly. It's not played as like, oh, look how hot this is.
No, no, no. And there's nothing wrong with furries getting something out of this. It's just at the beginning, I was like, my brain was like, okay, how much of a furbait type movie is this going to be? Because I'm not into that. And then his design was really off putting to look at, especially considering there was transitioning stages for him. And there was a point
Yeah.
where I was like, oh, that looks good. And then they just kept going, and I was like, no, stop. And then also, you got to think in retrospect, none of the other wolf designs or animal designs looked as bad as his, or looked as
I was gonna say
gross.
there are a lot of times where it almost seems like, based on the art style, it almost seems like his children sometimes don't even get the fur.
Yeah, yeah, which is interesting. So yeah, I did enjoy this movie overall. I thought the beginning was a little bit slow plotting. I thought it was a little off-putting visually, just specifically for him, but also sometimes, just to get in some negatives, the animation could be a little, to be fair, minimalist, let's say, for my taste. When I say that, I mean it's off-putting to me when characters have no faces. There was many times in which you saw like faraway shots and people would just be
Oh yeah,
walking through the
that trope.
streets, or even our main characters would just have no face. And I just and but it felt inconsistent. I felt like sometimes they would have faces and sometimes they wouldn't. Like there was these shots of her during what was a Christmassy time and near the shops, and all these characters from far away had faces, but then within the same sequence they would cut to a different angle or something, and then they wouldn't have faces, and I would just be like, commit to one or the other. Either commit to when you have a faraway shot or distance shots or whatever, you don't want to animate any faces on their heads, make them blank, or animate faces. I didn't like the switching between the two. It kind of just threw me off, and I was noticing. It made me notice the animation instead of admire it. That's
Hmm.
all. I don't know
Yeah,
if you
I
had that
remember there
problem.
were it's a thing that I'm kind of used to, but I remember it was a bit weird with the father especially.
Mm.
Because at first I thought that that was a thing that they were going for, which this kind of thing is used for, like not really knowing what this guy is about. But as we get spend more time with him, what little time we do get, we learn who he is, and therefore we see his face a bit more. But it just
Mm.
felt like it wasn't as poignant when we really started seeing his face. I feel like for the most part, we either got that distant, minimalistic face reveal thing, uh, and when we didn't get that, we got like half his face. But then when we see his full face, it wasn't like a big deal or anything like that.
No, no. So what about it the first time didn't ring with you like as strongly, and what about it the second time has? Is there anything specifically in the movie, any details or any specific things that you just didn't enjoy or didn't care for as much in this first viewing? And did those things go away in the second viewing, or are some of those still there?
I think I really misrepresented my first viewing. I did enjoy the film. It was just pretty much, oh, I enjoyed that other film more. So this film's
Mm,
good, but this film that I saw recently also, I just think about a bit more.
mm.
So yeah, seeing it on its own this time, having the advantage of knowing how it ends, where it goes, and all the little things was really good. Um, that's the main gist of my differences between first and second viewing. I think even there was a thing later in the film that on my first viewing I was a bit iffy on, but this time I completely didn't notice until I was reading up online about it. So yeah, I think I was just way more into the film this time.
Yeah, and what was that thing that you were mentioning?
Uh, it's a plot related thing. It's basically this is really jumping to the end, but I remember the first time the second last interaction between the two siblings was a fight, and then the very last interaction was a very like throwaway, hey, see you later kind of thing. It just felt
Mm,
like because of how dramatic um the the ending of the son character was, it felt like it was a bit weird that the narrator character didn't really get a proper final scene with them. But
right.
this time that kind of went over my head.
Yeah, for me, just to touch on that, I knew when their final scene was happening that it would be the final one because he wanted her to stay home and
Yeah.
so he could fuck off and whatever. But then she was just like, "Nah, I'm going to school, bye." And I was like, "Yeah, that's the final time they'll see each other."
Mm.
Um, yeah. Although I've talked about some animation or character design or animation things that I didn't like, I did like this movie's animation style. I liked its animation in general. It felt very a good mixture of Eastern and Western animation kind of thing, where there's a bit of a stiffness, but also a bit of a fluidity in this as well. Um,
Yeah, and I know that with Tokyo Godfathers and the con stuff, like that stuff is like super fluid, whereas this one used it a bit more sparingly, the fluidity.
but I felt like it used it in the right moments, specifically when they were running around being animals. I like those first person perspective shots, those POV shots of them running down hills and up mountains, and those are really
The
good.
snow sequence was really great.
Yeah, yeah, the snow sequence. Um, every now and then, I was a bit hit or miss on when they would implement kind of 3D animation into the film. It was only sparingly here and there, but sometimes I noticed it, sometimes I didn't. So it was kind of hit or miss. There was like
Mm.
a truck sequence where the dad, when he was alive, was driving his truck, like pulling it out, and it was very much a 3D truck in a 2D animated space. But I've
Okay.
seen that we've seen this before in things, and it worked more often than it didn't. And I just like the character designs, the human characters, the animal characters, the midway points, the half animal, half human designs. I really did like him. I like the simplicity. I like the kind of doughy, rounded features of the faces of the human characters, like the mother and when they were kids, especially. There's always that
Mm.
cute design that Japanese animation has for babies and toddlers. That is just you
Yeah,
just want to grab their cheeks, and they're
there's
very
a
cute.
word there's a word for it. I think it's like something like puny plush, like PUNI plush.
I was just gonna call them cutie. They're just cute.
Yeah.
They're cute.
I mean,
They're cute.
it's yeah. Puny plush tends to be used for cuter stuff. Yeah.
And I did enjoy that. I enjoyed the weather animation as well. I thought the snow and the rain and all of that looked really good as well. Sometimes in Japanese animated movies, it can be a little too much. Like, I like Tokyo Godfathers, but the snow sometimes could be a little bit noticeable. Like, I'm noticing that it's animated sometimes, but in this, it felt very just a part of it all. You know, go on.
You know what snow and rain are in Japanese, right?
No, do tell.
Ame and Yuki.
Yeah.
Other way around, yeah.
Yeah, no, I did read that actually. You're right. And I enjoyed the all the plants and the grass and her crop and all of that stuff was really good. I especially enjoyed just talking about the animation of weather and stuff, like at the very end when he's on the mountaintop howling and you get like that that sunrise shot where the sun's peeking over the mountains, and it's like that looked really great. Very Japanese animated, but also very good. Yeah, I fell in love with this movie more than I expected to, honestly, because, yeah, like I said, I think the poster is still god-awful to look at, by the way. I think it doesn't do this film any justice. If you look at that poster right now, it is, I don't know, after seeing the movie, like, it does represent it, but I don't know, I just didn't, I do not like that poster. The kid's animation looks weirder than it does in the film.
Design, not animation.
No, their design looks weirder than it does in the film, I think.
Posters are inanimate.
Unless they're holograms.
Unless it's the future.
Unless you have those posters. What are they? What is that called when you move to and from and there's like the image looks like it's moving,
Is that thing when you scratch it makes like that thing?
Yes, that's a great way to describe that. Yeah.
I have no idea what that's called.
I'm going to call them whatever that is called, a Tarzo, because I remember Tarzos having those effects on them. They're a very specific Australian thing, Tarzos.
I don't know what they're called, but I know what Puny Plush is.
So yeah, this film has a lot going for it more than I expected. I really did get drawn into these characters, their worlds. I think I was more invested in the mother and daughter than the son, but I think that's kind of the point. On a level, I don't know if you're supposed to be as emotionally invested in the son in comparison to those two, because he's distant.
I'm pretty sure it's meant to be a thing of like. I mean, obviously, there's a big thing in this film. It's like wolf versus human, but it's inevitable that the people that watching it are human, and to an extent, you just have to accept that like. The film's established that these two children are allowed to choose their own path between wolf and human. We can understand the human part, but with the wolf part, we just kind of have to accept that, this is who he is. He's the one that really has to understand this.
Yeah, I did find it interesting. Now, I'm not a wolf expert, Bartek. I don't claim to be. I've only watched Hangover 1 and 2, so I only know a little bit about wolf packs. But... Am I wrong? Or I thought wolves, I know they have packs as well, but weren't wolves also like solitary animals? Aren't they?
Well, there is that term lone wolf.
Yeah, I thought that. Because in this movie, it's very much like, oh, wolves, they don't like being alone. They like he doesn't like being alone as a wolf. He's very upset that wolf's lonely. And when I thought of wolves, I'm like, lonely is the word I would use to describe a wolf, honestly. Lone wolf. But I know they have wolf packs, so maybe a wolf expert will tell us that we're wrong and that wolves just love being sociable animals and they just love hanging out with foxes and that kind of thing, and bears, and they just love hanging out with animals and chilling out, not just solitary hunters that like to be alone and just hunt and be alone. Maybe I'm wrong. But that was an interesting thing I noticed in this movie as well. Like, I like when you get told they're werewolves, Bartek. We understand certain things about werewolves. Every kind of culture, every piece of fiction always has different rules for their mythos of vampires, werewolves, zombies, all that. I really did like how werewolves were in this movie, like how they can transform into 3 different stages, like the typical werewolf where you're half man, half wolf monster thing, your human phase, and just a wolf phase. I liked that. I thought that was cool.
Yeah, and the film acknowledges the whole like werewolves in popular culture thing with when Ame's reading the book and he's like really bothered by the fact that the thing that he is always represented as being the bad guy.
Yeah, the big bad wolf. Yeah.
He's Wreck-It Ralph.
Yeah. Yeah, well, this did come around the same time as Wreck-It Ralph, yeah?
Oh shit, it did, yeah.
So who's ripping off who? I don't know.
Oh, Japan or America?
I think we can blame Disney. This film did miss a trick of not having video game characters though, Bartek. So got to deduct a point on that one. But
Oh no,
Wreck-It Ralph
it's
did,
not Sonic.
yeah, Wreck-It Ralph did not have enough fur bait in it though. So I've got to deduct a point off that.
Well, Sonic did have a cameo in the first one at
All right,
least.
so 10 points to Wreck-It Ralph.
Oh no, I'm making a case against Wolf Children.
And an Oscar as well. um, yeah, this film was very, very solid, Bartek. I was just like, this is a solid film. Did you have any negatives on this viewing of it at all? That still linger or anything that popped up for you?
Honestly, not really. I was thinking about it last night and I was just really into it. Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking about it too. Other than just some animation, like some character designs and animation stuff that I was like, not big into. Overall, I did not have many, if any, flaws. I think a flaw that I did have was sometimes I wish that we didn't have to rely on narration as much. I know why it's there. I mean, there's always a reason why it's in movies and stories, but I felt like I could have used more visual storytelling because this film did a really good job of visual storytelling in certain moments to really emphasize things that the narration didn't need to do. And like, I really love that sequence where we see them aging by the classrooms. You know, we see.
I was about to say, yeah, that.
And I want more of that kind of thing. Or there's that montage of her being a single mum and raising him, and they're like biting on the furniture and all that kind of crazy stuff. I like that more so than her narrating this thing and saying stuff like, then after that day, my brother was never the same. I could have done without us being told specific stuff like that. For my own being, I understand why it's there, but for myself, a little bit too exposition heavy in points. I would have liked
That
to have
is true,
seen the
yeah.
brother change through the narrative instead of us being explicitly told that he has changed, and now we, the audience, are noticing it.
Yeah, and even at that moment when she brought it up, we literally just did see a sort of change in him, so it was already, being set up within 3 seconds of her bringing it up.
Yeah, but other than that, I thought it was great. I love the final song during the credits. I'm not
Oh,
really
yeah.
big into Japanesey songs and things, especially when we do get into Japanese animated stuff. When it comes to musical numbers or songs, I'm not as big into them, but I really did like it. I thought it was really great and emotional.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that since my first viewing, but then when it started, or at least when it got a few seconds in, I was like, oh my god, I remember this from my first viewing.
Yeah, it was really good. What were some things that you really enjoyed about it on this viewing? Any particular scenes or characters or ideas that were explored?
Um, I guess one thing I've forgotten to mention is that I'm just in general very big on like single parenthood kind of stories, so that on its own in this film really really got to me. Um, I remember one animated moment that I really liked was early in the part where Yuki was old enough to like move around and talk. There was one single shot where she was like climbing up the drawers
Mm.
behind the mum, and just the whole animation of her noticing the drawers, catching it, and then noticing the other drawer that she isn't holding down coming out and catching that. I remember I really enjoyed that shot.
Yeah, that was the sequence I really enjoyed too. That whole montage of her being a mum and the daughter being like nearly killing herself multiple times and all of that and or harming herself multiple times was really enjoyable. Um, I was really surprised too because when we've only talked about anime or animated Japanese animated films a few times, and we've only watched one on this show, and that one was way more of a comedy. This one doesn't really have any comedy in it. It has moments of levity, but overall, it's a pretty serious film. Would you agree?
Uh, yeah, it's still as serious as it does get. There's a lot of light-hearted stuff, and I will admit one of its comedy moments was I quite liked when when Yuki got sick and she didn't know whether to run to the pediatrician or the veterinarian.
Thank you, because I was struggling last night if that was supposed to be funny or not, because it's done in that very. See, as I'm not as familiarized with anime or Japanese animated films or the comedy sensibilities, it was done so po-faced and serious that I didn't know if I was supposed to be laughing or not at that. I thought it was very, very funny, but I could also see a serious, animated film doing that seriously and thinking that it was really clever, and I wasn't too sure if it thought it was clever or thought it was as silly as I did. But
I feel like if we didn't get the cuts between like, oh, now I'm on the phone with you, now I'm on the phone with you, then it would have been serious. Like if we saw that all in real time.
yeah,
Maybe then it would have been much more serious, but the cuts I think made it funny. And also the fact that in the end she was fine.
yeah, she was fine, luckily. I really liked the whole see, you're into the single parent thing. I'm really into people who have to make their own living or way in the world kind of thing, and this tickled that bone, especially once they move to the country and you have the whole Green Acres lifestyle thing in which they have to fix up the house, fix up the land, figure out
Yeah,
how
that's
to
great.
plant food and self-sustain, make friends with the community, be friendly, the dynamic between her and the old man, which another weakness of the film is I kind of wished that there was more with him. It kind of felt like I don't know, it just kind of felt like he just was, oh, okay,
Yeah,
we had that scene where they laugh together, where she's laughing at him, and that's kind of it. Like, oh, we're done now.
yeah, I seem to remember a bit more of him from the first viewing, but yeah, it was really just 2 or 3 moments, really.
Yeah, and they set him up ominously because he has a history of tormenting the people who have lived at that house before. It seems like, don't be mean to these people like you were the previous people. It's like, okay.
Yeah, I couldn't tell if that was a thing of like this one resident is different, or if people just like kind of misunderstood him. But I guess they're pretty straight faced about everything else, so I don't know.
Mm. But I love that kind of stuff. I love the city people being forced to go the country thing as well. I love the self-sustaining. It's just, discovering oneself in an, making your own new world and identity kind of thing was really well done, and that obviously gets explored with how the children grow up and how they figure out what lifestyles they are as well. It was very nice that the kids flipped because
Yeah,
she was all about being a wolf and being crazy, but then she becomes more and more and more like, I just want to be a human and obey societal rules and have a boyfriend and go to school and have friends and all of that stuff, and the son just being like, I can't be bothered with that. I'm just gonna hang out with a fox and live in the mountains and be the king of the forest. And that was really neat. I enjoyed the flipping of the characters, and it feels just true to life sometimes. The kids grow up to be very different to how they were as little kids, and it was really done very maturely as well, which I found very refreshing because I thought this was going to be a bit more of a silly movie at points, but overall it was a lot more serious in nature.
yes, especially after the classroom thing.
Yeah. He was a fun character, a new kid boy with his cut up ear.
Yeah,
He was fun. I wish there was kind of more of him, but I understand why there isn't. That's the thing. Like, this movie, weirdly enough, I felt it was very slow paced in a good way, but at the same time, I kind of just wished that we got more of it because I really did enjoy this world, these characters, this town, the school, all of these things, and
yeah,
it was great.
it's a kind of notion that I've seen in some Japanese works when they're over. And obviously this is a film that we didn't have the director or the writer saying it or anything. But there's this kind of attitude that like the film or the work is over, but these characters' lives will go on.
Yeah. Now, Bartek, here's things I will say that I'm so fucking glad did not happen in the movie. Here's my little section of things that I expected to happen, and I'm glad they didn't, because if this movie was dumber, these things would have happened. One, I'm glad that, like I said, it wasn't a movie just for the furries. I was really worried about that. But two, I was really worried that we were going to get the old liar revealed moment. I was worried that the townsfolk were going to find out that they're werewolves, and then you're going to have
Right.
drama about that, because they do set things up like that. There is a setup of what happens if people find out, and will it be negative kind of connotations, but really they don't bother exploring that, and I'm happy about that. This is just a quiet tale, a quiet story and exploration about being a single parent, and the children's journeys of discovering themselves. And I was really worried that they were going to amp up the drama by having conflict being really forced in there, by having this, these supernatural elements of being
Yeah,
a werewolf
even
being clashed against the townsfolk who are so nice until they
yeah,
aren't.
even better than not doing it is the film took its time to prevent that from happening
Yeah, yeah.
with the mother's determination.
Yeah, but I was just really worried that you're gonna have that moment where the townsfolk want to like attack them and burn down their farm or shit like that in turn, and they're like, they're monsters, they're wolves, because they also react to the idea of wolves being around as a scary thing in general. So there was these little seeds that they could have watered and made blossom into a very explosive, high octane drama, but honestly, I was very happy that they didn't do that. I was also worried that them as wolves, one of them was going to get shot by a farmer. I was worried about that.
Mortality, yeah.
Yeah, I was worried that you're going to get that kind of thing, or that classic scene of, oh no, my foot got stuck in a bear trap or something, or a rabbit trap. Oh no, and you have to help me. I was worried that we're gonna get little things like that. These really dumb, tropey, cliche type things that you see with these kinds of ideas. I was really worried that we were gonna get a lot of that, and I was so pleased that we didn't. And I was worried that the boy at school was going to be just the bully antagonist character who's like, I know what you did. But I was really happy that he wasn't that, and he matured and he became a love interest character. I was really happy with that. These are things, it's just like things that you expect to happen and they don't happen, and it's really great because at the moment I've been watching a lot of media, we've been talking about things on the show, and on and off the air and whatnot, in which there's been a lot of, oh, I think this dumb thing will happen, and then the dumb thing did happen, and it's just disappointing. Well, in this, none of the dumb things really did happen. It was great. I just have to
Yeah,
commend it.
yeah, that is very good about the film.
I'm trying to think what else there is I want to talk about with this, because this was just a solid film. It'll be one I wouldn't want to watch again anytime soon, though, because it
Mm.
is just such a quiet, sweet-natured film about very specific things that you want to leave it for
I
a few
gave it a year
years.
and a half. Yeah.
Anything you want to bring up about it? Anything you want to talk about?
I think it'd just be all like little moments. Like I remember I really liked the fact that when we were learning about the father, we learned that he chose that he wanted to live more as a human, and one of the big steps that he took towards doing that was getting his driver's license.
Hmm.
And then after he was gone, in place of like a family photo, that driver's license was the main representation that the children grew up on regarding him. I thought that was a really nice little touch. And yeah, and there was just a bunch of little things like the road in front of
Hmm.
the countryside house. How you learn through the visual language that going left takes you to school, going right takes you to the forest, and
Yeah.
you see little moments like that where the son wants to go one way, but he's been forced to go to the other, and then there are moments where like no, he's definitely going right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You get a good idea of the layout and the geography of things. It's always very satisfying when you do get that. I I um I was thinking about while watching this film, would this be a film that you could get non-anime, non-Japanese film related people into? Like, could you show this to normal people
Mm.
or the plebs or the normies or whatever you want to call them, just your average Joe who hasn't watched an anime or hasn't seen anything really from Japan? Would this be one that you could show them? I'm not too sure. I think it's still a little, no, I don't know. It's a little weird, but I don't know. What do you think?
I was thinking similarly, like a more age demographic kind of thing. I feel like this would work for pretty much any age demographic. I feel like it's, mature enough, but also light-hearted enough, and things like that. What do you think would would turn off people that don't like anime about it? Because I think it's fairly hits some fairly typical notes.
Well, one, you got the weird m- mysticism, mystical, supernatural, their wolf children thing that can turn people off. I think we're more accustomed to, but there is a very specific pacing style that comes from anime and Japanese related media that is very slow and meandering that people could get turned off by. You got to consider
Mm-hmm.
that because this is a very slow film where, there's not really a plot. There is plot elements, but you wouldn't say, like, it's the most plot
It
heavy
falls
thing. It's just kind of an atmospheric exploration character piece.
Yeah, it falls under the anime slice of life genre for sure,
Yeah,
for the most
and
part.
that can be a little bit harder to swallow for people. Even those kind of slice of life things for from the West are hard to swallow for people, let alone the kind of Japanese slice of life kind of thing. That's kind of thing. And I think we really can't undersell the fact that this film is just it is very Japanese still. It is, and sometimes people can get thrown off by different cultures kind of film styles or storytelling styles. This film really does emanate this very Japanese feel to it, which I appreciate, but I'm just not too sure about all of these elements combined. If it's the easiest one to get someone into is what I'm curious of. But I'm also not too sure what is, because I'm wrong with these things. Like, I look at a Studio Ghibli movie and I'm just like, I don't know how so many just non-anime fans or non-Japanese related media fans can swallow these as easily but they can't swallow other stuff as easily. The Studio Ghibli films are very Japanese and very slow pacing, very weird and odd, but it seems like they got a lot more mainstream appeal because they're very well known. Is that it? Is that the reason? I don't know.
They're definitely they're definitely a lot more marketed. And I know that a lot of people end up seeing them dubbed, and they get like very big names for those films.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. I still feel like Wolf Children might make it. I feel like the heart of the film might still engage people.
Yeah, I think that first act will turn people off a bit. It did me a little, I will be honest.
Yeah, I guess.
But if you push through, it's there, and it's not a long movie. It's just under 2 hours. Although it does feel a little over 2 hours. The pacing is that kind of slow plotting pace, which I don't mind. It just did feel a little long, but at the same time, like I said, I was so engrossed that I did want to see more of these people. So there's that to be said. I'm trying to think of what else there is to mention because it's just solid film. There's like little moments that I really enjoyed, but anything that you want to explore or talk about that is deeper about this movie? Any thematic stuff or questions that linger in your brain after having watched it?
Um, I don't know. I feel like I really understood the film when I was watching it. I guess at the end when Hana was saying, "Oh, by the way,
Mm,
this is another Japanese animated film we've done where there's a character named Hana who either wants to be a mother or is a mother."
true, true.
Yeah. Um, yeah. At the end when Hana says bye to her son Ame, it's played very much as just like desperate. I don't want to say goodbye thing, but then once he's moving, she does kind of accept it. I felt like that was fairly powerful because throughout the whole film we saw her as being this like very strong, determined mother character who I guess in terms of looking at it as human versus wolf, she's rather progressive. She doesn't have a problem with wolves. She likes them. And she understands that, because her children are half wolves, there's this struggle of like, how do you turn a wolf child into a wolf adult? Um, and she takes that seriously throughout the whole film, but then when she's faced with the challenge of one of my children actually wants to become a wolf adult, and in fact is a adult by wolf standards, he's 10 years old, she kind of has to immediately realize, I have to let him go, but she still wants to be a mother. She still has her, human side saying, this is a 10-year-old, they still have to stay with me. Um, So I guess in terms of interpreting that ending scene where she does accept it, it's this kind of moment where you think back to the old man asking her, um, why do you keep smiling through everything? Is she putting on a front for the son? Because when she tells him not to go, he turns around like shocked, like, oh, should I stay? Or is it a thing of like she has accepted it at that moment?
Mm.
If that makes
No, no, it
sense.
does make sense. Yeah, yeah, this film, it did tug at the heartstrings more than I was expecting, and that is the high praise I'll give it. I was walking in with no real expectations other than the poster turned me off, and the first act was a little bit like, ugh, but not really. It wasn't that bad, but it was a little bit slow, a little bit not my tempo, as Whiplash would say. Uh, so Bartek, you're more into anime, as we've said. For people who did enjoy this movie, are there similar movies or movies that you could see being something you would accompany with this that you would recommend or say this is worth checking out? Like if you like Wolf Children, you may be interested in this. Is there anything that pops to mind?
In terms of anime films, again, I've seen more anime shows than films. It's still a medium style that I want to explore a bit more. So not really off the top of my head in terms of movies. No,
Any shows?
any shows? There are a shitload of slice of life shows, but in terms of one like this, I'd have to think about it.
We'll put it on the social medias, I'm sure. Bartek's recommendations, and it'll be like a little picture of you and like a pie chart of like how much of a percentage you would pair this piece of media with this piece of media. Like, yeah, I'd say that.
This
Um,
goes well with a pinch of this.
I'll narrow it down for you, Bartek. A slice of life Japanese animated thing that takes place in, ooh, let's say a school. Does that help narrow it down?
Oh, right, that one. That one. Right, how could I forget?
Yeah, it is like
I
that.
will say, yeah, one more thing is, I don't normally cry at films.
Mm, no, you don't.
Uh, in fact, when it comes to me and crying at media, it tends to be more of a thing of like, did it make my eyes water?
Yeah.
Did I actually shed a tear? I'd have to say that this is probably the first thing that's made me shed a tear the 2 times I've watched it.
At what point, or was it different for each viewing?
It was actually different for both viewings, but they were both at the end. So I remember the first time it was when the sun was going away.
Mm.
When I was watching it this second time round, it didn't happen. I'm like, yeah, I guess it doesn't happen a second time. But then in the very next scene, when the narration shows the photo of middle school Yuki and her mother next to her, and she says something like, you know, I always love her smile. I think that got me.
Yeah. I unfortunately did not shed any tears, but I felt very emotional overall. I did like
It's all
the
good.
fact that the dad just died, like an animal. Like they just have his
Yeah.
body and put it in a bag. He was hunting the pheasants or whatever it was for. I did find that very interesting. Like, although he chose human side, it felt like he had more of an uncontrollable werewolfism thing going on than the kids ever did. It seems like the kids could control it more, but it seems like the dad had like a much more of an animal instinct that he just had to unleash more often than like the kids who chose one side or the other. Um,
Yeah. There's a big nature versus nurture thing going on, but with the kids, it's more so the fact that they're kids. They're not, I guess, emotionally in control as much. Like when they get angry or upset, they'll like grow their wolf features and have to be told like, no, 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 turn it off.
yeah, I do love after you're 12 years old, you don't need parents anymore, basically. Like, you know what I mean? I know that's true in places where there's boarding schools and whatnot, but that was very amusing to me. It was like, and she did a good job raising me those 12 years, that mother of mine. Like, that's where it felt like the mothering stopped there. Then she was just like a colleague that I have. No, I'm joking around, of course, but yeah, this is
No, it is
this
funny.
is
Yeah.
worth a watch. Definitely, a lot more, and I'm keen to check out this guy's other works. I'm a bit more familiar with character
Yeah.
designs or some ideas from some of the others. There's one with like a red monster guy, I think, that I'm a little bit more familiar with, but I'd have to look at him again. But definitely keen to check out this guy's stuff. The Digimon movie,
I know.
definitely have to check it out.
I've never watched anything Digimon. I have checked out The Girl Who Leapt Through Time. I remember that was a nice film. That was also a little bit slow paced, but also kind of slice of lifey.
Not a time travel movie.
Well, it is a time travel film, and she literally time travels by leaping.
She's a quantum leap. Yes.
It's literal, Ryan. She like jumps out over her window and then she time travels.
Nice. All right, I think that's all we got to say about this one. Short and sweet and to the point, but that was,
Yeah. What did your wife think, Ryan?
She was very similar to me. She enjoyed it very much too. She also didn't like the wolf design at the beginning. She was like, "Ugh, Bartek's got us into some furry shit, hasn't he?" Like, she just shook her head. She was a lot more downbeat about going into the movie than I was. But she really enjoyed it overall as well.
Okay.
She got mostly engaged. She reacted. She didn't cry, but she did a lot of and oh no's kind of reactions to it. So
I know one of my big reasons for picking it was I've noticed that she's not a big fan of some of the films that I pick, so I thought like, oh, I think she'll like this one.
you pushed it there, didn't you? Because you're like, I'm a real big fan of some of the films I pick. I'll give her the one where it's about a wolf that fucks this woman and makes her pregnant with wolf babies. That seems like a tame
Right,
film
that's
for
only
her.
the first hour and a half.
So, Bartek, it's my recommendation for next episode if you're ready for that.
I'll allow it.
Good, that's a line I usually say. So we've been having films that we like too often, it feels. I think it's time to do a film
Good.
that we don't well
No. I mean, good that what you're about to say
that we don't like. Well, don't like is maybe not the right word. A film that isn't good is what I'm gonna state. It's been
Yes.
one that I've mentioned a bunch to you, Bartek, but I've been putting it off because I want to do it with a guest and this, but I can't wait any longer. We've got to talk about The Snowman, the Michael Fassbender film, The Snowman. We got to talk about The Snowman. We got to talk about it
Oh
now.
boy,
We got to
yeah.
talk about The Snowman next episode.
I know. I need to finally watch it fully awake.
Yes, don't spoil too much about your history. That's for next week. So we'll be doing was it 2000, I want to say 18 film, I want to say.
18 or 17.
Film The Snowman, starring Michael Fassbender, directed by Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy himself, whoever that guy was. We will be watching that. Find a copy of it, watch it. You'll see why we want to talk about it. If you haven't seen it before, don't look anything up, just watch the film. And you'll see why
Speaking of looking it up, 2017.
you'll see why we chose it. It's a film, or is it? Question mark. So we'll be talking about that. I'm very excited. I've been thinking about this episode. I was like, oh, what am I gonna pitch at the end? What film do I want? Because I had a list, and I'm like, I don't know what one. And I just been noticing we've been covering films that we like a lot, like one of us enjoys or whatever, but this is kind of one we both agree it's not good is what we definitely agree on, but whether we like it or not we'll see on this second viewing or on this third or
That
fourth
is a good
viewing.
question. Do I like it? Yeah.
Do I like it? So, listening people, that is our episode. You can find us on the social medias of Facebook and Twitter. Just type Spit and Polish Presents and you shall find us pretty easily. You can also find us on any podcatcher available. Hey, while you're there on a podcatcher, why don't you rate and review us on whatever ones allow it? It's always very greatly appreciated. If you have any thoughts or views or things you want to express to us about films that we have discussed, or heck, films you may want us to even cover, suggestions, you can easily email us at spitandpolished@gmail.com. All of this info is in the description of this episode in case you are like, what was that email again? Spitandpolished@gmail.com? What was that? Twitter? Yes, we have that all in the description, so make sure to snuggle up with your loved ones, watch The Snowman for next episode so that you can be fully prepped for our discussion on it. Bartek, any parting words of wisdom you want to bestow onto the people, the listening people, other than remember to be kind to each other?
Words of wisdom. As much as the film, glossed over it,